I am going to talk about a study that my team did in conjunction with the Sierra Club a few years ago, focused on biosolid-based fertilizers, also known as sewage sludge, hence the title of the study. But before I get to the sewage sludge part, a quick intro to PFAS chemicals for those who aren't that familiar. The acronym is at the top, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It refers to a huge group of chemicals. It even includes some chemicals that are actually polymers. And these substances they're entirely human-made, don't exist in nature, but have been used in a huge variety of products and parts in so many industries because of their properties: resistant to harsh chemicals, waterproofing and oil-proofing treatments and coatings, very effective for those. And they're extremely stable, which also means that they don't break down in the environment. Or the PFAS that do break down into persistent PFAS. So a few examples of the very many applications out there shown in the photos. And to highlight one of them at the left is firefighting foam that uses PFAS, because that's a source of many of some of the worst contaminated sites. Exposure at this point of humans and wildlife completely spans the globe. I pulled out just a couple of examples that I think tell a story, such as a community in Greenland of Inuit people who live a traditional lifestyle eating marine mammals. And because of that, they have some of the highest non-occupational PFAS levels in their blood of anyone. I mentioned ski waxers. So one of the many things and applications of PFAS you might not think of, but ski waxes have come under fire, and people who wax skis actually have been found in a study to have much more PFAS in their blood. So these chemicals definitely get into our bodies. And the CDC does biomonitoring periodically of blood from people across the United States and finds PFAS in virtually every sample tested. As for health impacts, two of the oldest PFAS chemicals are the best studied. Those are called PFOA and PFOS. The acronyms, I won't get into the details in this talk, but listed in blue are some of the health risks associated with those chemicals that have the strongest body of evidence. So immune system problems, thyroid problems, and various types of cancer, those are all some of the important ones, but many body systems can be affected. And much is not known about a lot of PFAS chemicals. Now, to switch gears to talking about wastewater, to get you in the frame of mind, here's a picture of a huge wastewater treatment plant. Just to keep in mind that both human waste and a lot of industrial waste flow into this wastewater treatment plant and many plants around the country. And liquids are separated from solids. Liquids will be emitted to the river, in this case, after being cleaned as much as they can be. And the solids, well, those are sewage sludge. So sewage sludge is called biosolids as a kind of euphemistic industry term. It's easy to say, so I use it a lot. And the solids from the treatment plants are composted and sterilized and then can be used and marketed as the soil fertilizer. It's estimated around half of all US sewage sludge end up applied to land. Why we decided to test products as part of a study is partly that these products are the end product of many industrial waste streams. Even though you think of sewage as, a sewage plant as being human waste, there's a lot of industrial waste in there. So that's where a lot of our industrial pollutants end up. And we read about prior research showing PFAS and biosolids tended to be especially high, and that land application does lead to plant uptake, which then gets into the food supply and contaminates water. And I referenced Purdue University because there's a group that's done a bunch of that research at Purdue. A close to home example for us of a real PFAS disaster from sewage sludge is Jason Grostick's farm. We work with him now on various advocacy campaigns. He's become kind of a reluctant advocate after his farm was shut down by the state of Michigan, after the state was doing a research project and tested some of his soil and some of his beef and hay and found high levels of PFAS. That's been kind of a catastrophe because the state doesn't have a plan in place to help farmers, and that this kind of thing happens too. So how this happened is just outlined on the right side of this slide. There's a metal plating facility called Tri-Bar in a city called Wixom, not very far from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I am. That Tri-Bar makes a lot of parts for the auto industry. If you think about really shiny car parts, those are often chrome-plated plastic or sometimes metal. The chromium plating uses very toxic chromium compounds, and to protect their workers, they use what's called a mist suppressant to suppress the chromium mist. The mist suppressant historically contained PFOS. They have since switched to a different PFAS chemical. But the PFOS that they used for years, the waste from their equipment was washed into the wastewater treatment plant. The solids became sludge or biosolids. Jason's farm and a bunch of other farms in the area used that as fertilizer. It was marketed as this really great, nutritious stuff. And that's how that contamination happened. So in 2020, we tested these 9 products listed here. These are all sold at different retail type places in small enough bags that a home gardener could use them. Written here are the source plant, if known. Some of them are a specific wastewater treatment plant source, and others, like bought at Home Depot and Menards, don't say the source. In red is the percent of the product that is said to be biosolids. So most of them are really high percentage. This just gives you an idea of how these products can be marketed. Milorganite is a really old one from Milwaukee's wastewater. And the testing that we chose, a few different types of analysis. Targeted PFAS testing for 33 individual PFAS compounds. We did an oxidation assay I won't talk about in this talk, unless there are questions. And we did a total fluorine testing, which means we test for the presence of fluorine, and there's a way to also test for the presence of, or to figure out how much is organic fluorine, meaning fluorine bonded to carbon. That is an indicator of PFAS, although it doesn't tell you what type of PFAS. And there are some compounds, like some pharmaceuticals that could show up in this organic fluorine number and not be PFAS. But I will talk later about those results and what we think they mean. Actually, the organic fluorine is the first set of results I'm going to show. So total organic fluorine for each of the products tested is shown on the right-hand column. And those are units of parts per billion, which in a minute, we'll compare those numbers to what we found in the targeted testing. So very likely PFAS in all of these products. And not too surprising, given the many industrial sources, as well as even the residential sources of human waste can have PFAS, that anything you wash down the drain can end up in this stuff. So if there's PFAS in your products or personal care products or human waste, that can get in there too. The targeted testing doesn't cover all possible PFAS chemicals because there are so many, but this one did 33 compounds. We detected 24 of those compounds in these various products. Most of them had around a dozen or so different PFAS chemicals. So this chart shows the concentration of total PFAS measured on the y-axis and the individual products along the x-axis. The colors are divided into chemical categories of PFAS, which I'm not going to go into detail now, but suffice to say there's a range of types of PFAS that come from probably various sources. Out of the targeted testing, there's not a lot we can compare these levels to that we found in the biosolid products. We can compare them to previous research, and the numbers are in line with what other people have found. And there aren't very many states that regulate this stuff, but Maine does have a screening limit for land application of biosolid products. And so we compared our levels in the levels found in the products we tested of PFOA and PFOS to the screening limits that Maine has for those chemicals. So each of the products is listed in the chart and numbers that are shaded in red or pink exceed Maine's limits, and in green do not exceed the limits. You can see that 8 out of the 9 products would not pass Maine's screening limit for land application. And that is the case for probably most biosolids that you could test for PFAS today. I can't say that about every possible product, but it's really common type of contamination in this product. Back to the total organic fluorine and comparing that to the targeted PFAS, we found, not surprisingly, that the total organic fluorine far exceeded what we could account for from the 33 specific PFAS chemicals. So most of the organic fluorine is unaccounted for. We find this in other realms as well, other types of products and environmental media, if you test for total fluorine. So there's a lot of stuff missing, a lot of likely PFAS missing. And in this study, we weren't able to specifically test further, but we have reason to believe it's probably a lot of fluoropolymer particles. So those would be solid pieces of plastic that might be made of things like the Teflon polymer, which is PTFE listed there. And there are others as well. And there are probably other PFAS compounds that were not in our targeted testing. The importance of all that kind of remains to be investigated because we don't know the specifics on that. Future research. I'll pivot to talking about how the state of Michigan was able to reduce PFAS in sewage sludge using its industrial pretreatment program, abbreviated IPP. That is a program that's administered in relation to the Clean Water Act and has been done for a long time for a lot of contaminants, but Michigan added a PFAS program to the IPP. And so they told municipal wastewater treatment plants in Michigan that they had to find out if they were passing through PFOS or PFOA to surface waters, and if so, to mitigate. They found that PFOS was the main chemical that was a problem. It was in a lot of wastewater effluent, and it was getting into the treatment plants from the sources that are bulleted there. Landfill leachate that had industrial waste, metal finishers like Tribar from the story a minute ago about the Grostic farm. There are a lot of metal finishers in Michigan due to the auto industry. Sites contaminated by firefighting foam or other industry, paper manufacturing, sewers that had residue from firefighting foam, either training or fighting actual fires. A lot of this contamination is just from training with this foam. Interventions that Michigan required the plants to make were quite effective for the most part for PFOS. And keep in mind, this is just one PFAS chemical, but it is a really important one in Michigan and many places. So at the individual plants, if you look at the far right column, you can see the percent reduction of PFOS after intervention. A lot of the interventions were putting filtration at the source, and the filtration was granular activated carbon. So an activated carbon filter that has a high surface area that tends to pick up PFOS effectively. It is not as effective for all types of PFAS. So it's not necessarily the perfect solution. In a couple cases, they were elimination of source, like drums that were leaking firefighting foam. So those interventions had some success, but we want to point out that the filtration material that was used in so many of them does not retain various types of PFAS that are commonly used. And when you use filter media, you are moving pollutants from one place to another. You're moving it to the filter media. Now you have contaminated filter media. It has to be regularly changed out in order to keep working. Something has to be done with it. You either have to dispose of it or regenerate it by burning. If you burn it, you're releasing unknown PFAS and other chemicals into the air. If you landfill it, okay, it's in a landfill, it may eventually leach PFAS. So that's a cycle that just keeps going. And that's why we think this is good that Michigan did this, but that is not the ultimate solution. So at the Ecology Center, we work heavily on the prevention side of PFAS, cutting off upstream sources when possible, using non-PFAS alternatives, definitely for firefighting foam and for lots of consumer products and industrial processes. And we have multi-pronged strategies to work on that reduction of the uses of PFAS. So that is the end of my talk. It's a quick summary here. Targeted PFAS testing, 24 of 33 compounds were found. Those targeted PFAS did not even come close to accounting for all the organic fluorine found in the fertilizer products. Probably fluoropolymers and other unknown compounds are responsible. And I talked a little bit about Michigan's intervention and the limitations of that. So with that, I just want to acknowledge the Sierra Club, great volunteers we worked with, and our funding sources. Thank you.